Securities offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through CWM, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Carson Partners, a division of CWM, LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors. This is The Way to Wealth, with host Scott Ford, a jiu-jitsu fighting, woodworking, beekeeping entrepreneur who is also the managing director, partner, and wealth advisor of Carson Wealth. Financial freedom is the goal, and clarity and simplicity is how we'll get there. Let's get to it. This is Way to Wealth.
Hello, and welcome back to the Way to Wealth podcast, where we're all about making money simple, giving you the opportunity and freedom to fully live and fully live now, today. That's all we got. Super excited today. Have a friend and guest, Rich Christiansen, that I'm going to introduce to you and share some what I believe to be sound, solid wisdom. And before I do, let me just share a little bit about Rich so you know of his background. And by the way, I can't go through it all because it would take the entire podcast given Rich's background. But what I can say, besides thought leader, educator, mentor, is a couple things. One, he has authored several books, Wall Street Journal and USA Today, national best-selling books. The other thing I'll say is he has businesses or does business in 14 countries and is a principal founder of Hoodoo Capital, an early stage venture capital firm, chairman of the board of trustees at Southern Utah University and founder at Brigham Young University. And beyond all that, what I'm going to tell you, what I've appreciated most about Rich is just who he is as a human being, how he interacts and shows up with his family, and how he candidly has shown up with me has been congruent, authentic, and special. So happy to introduce him to you. And with that, Rich, welcome to the Way to Wealth podcast.
Thank you so much, Scott. Really appreciate being here, and I would reciprocate those statements. I've appreciated how genuine, how real, and how transparent you've been. So I really appreciate that. I think we get all tied up in wealth, and that is the end outcome, but I think it's actually the quality of our life and the impact that we have that means the most, and we can use wealth to enable that or cripple it.
Couldn't agree more. I like to start typically with a couple questions, Rich, when I do these podcasts. And one, just because I know you, the audience doesn't. So would love to know a little bit about your backstory and hey, how did we get here today? If you could fill us in.
Well, it's so interesting. This topic that we're discussing is, I think, the most important content that I've actually delivered to the world, Scott. Most people do know me as a very, very prolific entrepreneur. I founded or co-founded 52 companies, a bunch of failures, but a number of good successes also. I got midway through my career, and I had my mentor call me over to Birmingham in the United Kingdom. And he called me over, which means he says I need a chat, which means a 22 and a half hour flight. So I fly from Salt Lake to Atlanta, Amsterdam across the channel into Birmingham, United Kingdom, calls me in his office, and this is the conversation we had. He said, Rich, we're delighted with the progress you're making in the U.S. market, but that's not why I'm called you here today. I called you here on a personal matter. He then said, you can replace anything in this life. You can replace jobs, money. You can replace even that nice car that you're driving right now. But these three things you cannot replace. You cannot replace, number one, your health. Number two, your trust relationships. And most important, your family. Go home. If you're back in work in the next 2 weeks, you're fired. Swish, 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 swish. He swishes me out the office. I'm standing there dumbfounded. I just flown 22 and a half hours for that conversation. And needless to say, that 22 and a half hour flight, Scott, back home was a very long flight, as I considered and pondered kind of how I'd been living my life the last couple of years. I'd been in India the prior year and got pertussis, a whooping cough. And although my family had all been immunized, brought it back and I'd given it to all of my sons. And so we're just coughing, heaving, dying. My son even ended up in ICU. And what was I doing? I was trying to be Mr. Wonderful. I was sleeping under my desk 2 or 3 nights a week still. I was still running around. I should have probably been in the hospital. And at that point, I just interrupted and says, why am I doing this? What really, really matters? And so I deeply reflected. As I got home, the first thing I did is I raced to the room of my little then 2.5-year-old son, Nathan, and raced to his crib and picked him up, expecting to express love. And I was mortified that this precious little boy pushed me away screaming. He didn't even know his father was. That was the moment I quit the big rat race world and made the decision not to chase the brass ring, not to try being Mr. Wonderful. I have no doubt I would have been a CEO of maybe one of the Inc. 500 companies by now, but I would have done it without my precious children and my family. And although it took me a year or two to grind my way and position out of it, it really resolved to me, Scott, what was most important, and shifted dramatically my paradigm, my perspective. And it was actually the beginning of building these critical footings that we're going to talk about today, where we started very deliberately and thoughtfully and intentionally parenting, putting these deep-seated, rooted values and infrastructure in place to protect our family. So we can fix these things, but we have to be really, really deliberate, because end of the day, what matters most is thank you, Dr. Horn. I praise you to this day. Your health, trust relationships, and most importantly, the precious relationships we have with our family, even when they're messy. So that's kind of what started me on this path, Scott. And then it's been quite the journey since then to get to some of this interesting content we'll talk about.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. That's fantastic. And yeah, so when we say, how do we get here today? Well, it would probably come to no surprise to the audience. This is the Way to Wealth podcast. So you're familiar with the Way to Wealth. We're going to talk about a section of that today. And you've heard me talk about in the past and continue to talk about, because I feel like it's what I'm here to do. And that is taking care of that financial piece, simplify that financial piece, creating economic independence and financial freedom. But why? Well, to lead to what we're really here to do. So that's the health, wealth, wisdom, and happiness. And that's that wealth piece. Let's get you financially free. That's the whole way to wealth. And then real wealth drops down to when you recognize you have enough, which is what we're here to help you with. Once you recognize you have enough, we want you dropping down to love. And not saying you're not already there. We're just saying, let's maximize that, because that's what it's really all about. And without getting into the other pieces of health and the wisdom and the happiness, all I'll say is it's what Rich is talking about. It is that health. It's about relationships. It's about family. That's really where the wealth is. So anyway, shocker that we've connected and doing podcasts, and you're going to hear more from Rich to come. We have some exciting, cool things that we're up to that we're happy to share, feel called to, with visions and meaning beyond us. So it's exciting to see where this flows and goes. So what are we really trying to do? Well, money's a tool. It's an energy. What do we really want to pass on to the next generation? Isn't it like what the mistakes we've learned so that they don't have to make those mistakes, the things that went well for us so that they can follow those, or at least learn from them and go their own path with that? So here's the frame that I use. And I don't even think I've shared this with it. You've heard me say this, Rich, so I'll do it now and see what you think, and then want to learn what you think about it. But how we got here's Way to Wealth, estate, and legacy. And what I'll say is the frame I like to use. I'm a business owner and entrepreneur. I always have been, all the way back when I was a kid doing magic. And what I've come to learn and distill is what I call the 4 Ps of business, the 4 Ps of a sustainable business. And the 4 Ps to me are purpose, people, process, and profits. Well, it just so happens that I think those 4 Ps are also key to a sustainable life. And I think those 4 Ps are also key to a sustainable family. Purpose, people, what are the relationships in that family? Process, what do you live by? What are your plans as far as meals? What your rhythms look like? And then profits, meaning money can be used as energy to sustain all of that. So anyway, the 4 P's of a sustainable business, I kind of had this epiphany that, you know what, that's like applicable to life and it's applicable to family. So would love your thoughts on that, Rich, and would love to hear really what your view is on this estate planning, family, and legacy piece.
Scott, it's just so delightful. Every time we have a conversation, I just light up because you're using different words to actually articulate the very concept that I'm approaching. And so just really in such, strong alignment. I love the 4 Ps. I really, I guess the content that I'm focusing on, you're focusing very much on kind of the back end. I guess what our friend Terry is, maybe I understand now, is calling the omega, and I'm focusing kind of on the front end. So this estate planning concept and portion is just a critical, fundamental component of what I believe. However, I think the best way to actually track that is actually to put it in place, not when you're dead, not do a post-mortem on it, not wait until your grandkids are reading your will, but actually to live it and learn it and deeply breathe it now. I put in place, similar to your model. Can I go through kind of how I structure my model? Because it's a very similar concept, just different words. The family legato canvas, the family model canvas, and this is how you paint your life. The underpinnings or the base level of this is your values. It's establishing what are your values, what do you stand for, what do you believe in. We do it in business beautifully. We do it in religions like crazy. We do it in education institutions, but it's such a novel concept to actually think to formally establish and root and define what your family values are. But they're the underpinnings. They're the underpinnings. They're the foundation. And guess what? If you don't set them, somebody else is going to. And I'm meaning gangs do it. I'm meaning the high school sports team and the dance team's doing it. And your values may or may not align with those. And so I'm just suggesting first thing to do is underpin it with the values. I had such an interesting, can I tell one quick story to set the context of this?
Of course, as much as you want.
I was invited back to do a lecture at Harvard a number of years ago, and I absolutely was dreading this lecture because when you show up to talk there, they always have one of the deans take you to dinner. And I drew the dean of religion. I mean, here's a business guy having to go to dinner with the dean of religion. So I almost, honestly, Scott, I almost canceled the visit. But I'm so grateful that I went because we got to dinner, and here this religion professor starts just drilling me, asking me about my religious, first question is tell me about your religious doctrine. And then he, pretty uncomfortable right now, asked me about your religious symbols. And then he went on to ask me about, now this is sensitive, but tell me about your religious, what did he call them? He called them, it was a really interesting word. He called it religious, I don't know, it was like traditions. It was not traditions. It was a very charged word. And I'm just like, and we're going through it and it's very uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden he flips the table and he says, now here's my area of study. Every religion and every government has those 3 key fundamental elements. They have symbols, they have doctrine, and they have rituals. Rituals was the word. They have rituals. And so he went on to describe if you do not have them, the government breaks or the religion just quickly fades away. And I was just captivated and fascinated with this topic. And I asked the question, does this hold true for families? And he says, well, I never thought about it. And we went through the Rockefellers. We went through the Kennedys. By 2:00 in the morning, we're still going. We're going through the Vanderbilts. We're going through all of the, really stable, well, my heavens, the King and the Queen of England, you name them, we went through it. And guess what? Every one of those stable families have rituals, traditions, symbols and doctrine. And I thought, wow, that's the piece that I'd been missing of this puzzle of able to articulate it. So that's actually where I got the seedings of these top 4 pillars that I put on top of the values. So the first is have you ever thought to do a symbol in your family? Have you ever thought to do a mascot in your family? Again, the gangs are doing it. The basketball team's doing it. The drill team's doing it. For crying out loud, the junior high band's doing it. Is your family doing it?
Hmm.
Yeah. So symbols is the top pillar.
Powerful. That's so interesting when I think about that in the correlations to business. It's where my brain just automatically goes. I mentioned people or purpose, people, process, and profit. And like in that order, what is the purpose? And so what's the purpose of the family? What's the mission of the family? And then, the people, well, everyone needs to know, what are we doing here? And what do we stand for? So what are the core values of the business? Well, we're clear. We got 4. Yeah. Well, what are the core values of the family? What are the values that we stand for? And then you're taking it, as part of the doctrine. And then when you think of process, where they're the rituals, like in the company, we have meeting rhythms, and we have, a list of what the meeting looks like with the agenda we follow. We start with good news. Here it is. So it's a ritual. Well, doesn't that tie to the family? And look, I'm learning this on that correlation. So, literally Rich is coming out and we're going through this, Angie and I, for the family. So I'm not claiming to have the answers. I'm just saying, hey, this makes sense. There's work to be done here. I see the correlation. And so, yeah, wanting to share what I'm learning, what I'm doing, and the why behind it. So yeah, symbols, doctrine, and rituals, right, Rich?
Yeah, and I've actually modified the verbs a little bit. Again, I got the underpinning of values, and it took me 30 years to develop this. Basically, after this experience, man, my wife and I went all in because we did not want to raise entitled children. We did not want to have our children growing up to be serial killers living in our basement. We absolutely just deeply wanted to have a bonded, rooted family, and we saw all the social problems that were occurring in kids on media and that. So we really, particularly after that experience, I went all in, changed models dramatically, and this is the structure we came up with, what I'm going to share with you. So values, here, I'll just hit it quickly and then you can pick me apart. Values underpins it, and then you have to have a symbol and mascots and symbols. Followed with that, very similar to business, is what's your family mission statement? What's your family mantra? What's your family tagline? What's your family punch points? What's the family word cloud? So the doctrine, or just the information, the rules that you live by, is the second pillar. The third pillar on top of that is it's the traditions. We as humans, we love traditions. The symbols identify who we are. The doctrine show us the guidance and kind of how we behave, and if you will, it's the rules. It's the constitution of behavior. But traditions is that, just like in religion, just like in the school, we march underneath, we turn our tassel, that's tradition. It roots us and bonds us and makes things really special. And it makes us feel bonded and identified and part of a deep community. Families don't think to do this, and it's critical that we put 2 types of traditions in place. First of all, the short term, what you call rhythms, I call them cadences. And then secondly, the more rare, very, very, very special ones that signify things. That graduation, turning the tassel or tossing the hat in the air, receiving the diploma, is an education one. Pledge allegiance. That's why so many people get angry as individuals, or kneeling, is because that's a very sensitive thing. When we put our hand over that's a tradition. Or as my friend at Harvard called it, a ritual. This is our family logo right here. And at the center is my wife wrapped in white. I surround her in black to protect, provide, preside, which is some of our family doctrine. And pass my colors to each of my boys. Timmy's yellow, Johnny's green, Alex's light blue, Nathan is dark blue, Matthew is red. They get to pick their colors and express. When they get married, they then, the little dot behind, they circle and follow that same process. And my grandkids turn, get to select their color. So everybody in their family knows where they sit. They know where they resolve. And each one of my grandkids, even the 2 or 3 year olds, will come up and touch and say, Elise, Ariel, they know where they belong. So one of the super cool traditions that we've established that is one of the more, quote, sacred ones is when my sons marry, we take them down to the cabin in our very, very special place. And above the hearth where we have a huge mantle that I had built of this beautiful crest, family crest with all this hidden stuff, I take a very expensive piece of jewelry and present it to them and administer them with their hand raised to the square, an oath, a family oath of how we intend to behave. And it's so private, I'm not even going to share it. But it does involve things like reaching kindness. We'll always, as the symbol shows, we'll point inward and not selfishly point outward. So being able to have that special tradition in place, Scott, you know how that deeply bonds and means. I'm really on a tear here now, but I can't help myself because I get this excited about it. I was on a cruise a couple of years ago, and I always wear the logo. I don't brand anything else now. I don't believe in. I don't wear all these other brands. I wear brands I believe in. So I'm wearing the logo. A guy comes up and asks about the logo, which happens about 5 times a day. And I tell him the simple reason. He says, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. I said, what are you talking about? That's the best idea. He says, well, half your sons are going to get divorced. What are you going to do then? And my first response, well, my sons aren't going to get divorced. But then it troubled me so bad that night I did not sleep the whole night. And so I called an early breakfast. I went, knocked on all the cabins and drug them out of bed and got to breakfast. And with all my sons and daughters, we're sitting around there, and I recount this story that had happened. And I said, so here's the deal. You all have a place in this family logo. And I do not care if you get divorced. You will always be in my logo. And if we have to add 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 or 9, if we have to put squares in there, we'll do it. You are permanently part of this family. There's enough love. You will always be part of my life. I will never cease my love to you. Simultaneously, my daughter-in-laws burst out crying and weepingly just came up and squoze and hugged me. What's the power of a symbol? What's the power of a tradition? What's the power of having some doctrine in there? And I don't know. It's so interesting, Scott, how we can heal so many of the wounds just by getting really clear on the values and then articulating them. Like with my daughter-in-laws.
Yeah, it's so interesting you shared that story, Rich, because literally I had a conversation 15 minutes before we jumped on here. And this is exactly what this gentleman's a friend of mine, friend and colleague that I know. And we were talking just about healing. And he literally used that same. He doesn't do family, this type of family work. Yet he said, he shared this. I'll just share it because it literally just happened, that he had a conversation with his wife that was so open that he's like, I love you so much that even if you felt you would be happier leaving and not being with me, I would 100% support that. And she didn't know how to answer it. But the point is, he said that, he went on to say, he's like, because even if that happened, I wouldn't stop loving her, right? So it's like our relationships are relationships. And whether that's past relationships, whether you thought they were ended poorly, no matter what, there's still love, there's still relationships there. And like this whole, it's what I talked about earlier, that this whole thing's about love. It's like, it's this overwhelming sense of well-being is what we're all after.
Well, it's relationships. And we're living in a world right now where I think these amazing, powerful spirits are dropping down and they're landing in just like, the cow pasture just in gunk. And providing stability so that our amazing grandchildren, and I'm now, my children are almost raised, but having a vibrant, beautiful, wonderful home where your kids are dancing and singing, bringing their friends home. And then more importantly, the grandchildren. And if you don't have immediate family, even the stability of love and setting just a stable place. I mean, this is my words, but the whole purpose, I believe, we're down here on this beautiful, crazy earth is to expand our souls, to grow our souls. And we can do that in light ways or dark ways. And this is a very, very light way to do it.
Yeah.
Scott, could I bounce back? Because I feel like I got so excited I jumped off the 5 pillars, and I at least want to say them.
100%.
Values underpinning. Number 1, logo symbols. Number 2, doctrine. Number 3, traditions. Number 4 is I put a kicker in there called life-defining events. I put very specific rites of passage in the path of my children, my grandchildren, my great-great-grandchildren. It's the legacy of it. The content that I'm teaching is living now and vibrantly and real and putting it together. And then the last piece is the financial piece, which most people don't have a clue how the Rockefellers did it, or how to put the estate planning in place and put the financial instruction in, so that you don't blow your family up. I've seen countless families blow their family up and not prepare them. And so the 5th part is structure. The 4th is probably my favorite, and I think the most important. It's deliberately inserting rites of passage in your children, grandchildren's life that teaches the culmination of all the other events. And as I tell this, I'm very, very hesitant because people then try doing mine, and I always say, please don't do mine, even though mine are the bomb. Woo-hoo, mine are the bomb. But you've got to kind of come up with your own that espouse what your values are. Can I tell them what mine are real quickly?
Yes.
Okay, I've got like 6. The first is when my children are 8 and when my grandchildren are 8, and so on and so forth. Take 2 at 8 is great date. First time they get to pick where they go to dinner, sit down and talk very openly, very directly, very honestly about sex, about drugs, and about the use of media. And give them all full information to the level that they're able and consume, and instantly start an open dialogue. When my children are 12, I take them for 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 weeks to a third world country. The first week, we will bond deeply and do crazy, insane, fun things, such as ride elephants down the street of Bangalore, go visit Taj Mahal, go around the Bodhana in Nepal. Each one of my sons kind of get to pick where that is, but the first week is about fun and excitement and enjoyment. The second week is about serving, seeing the world condition non-entitlement. We'll go hold the dying children, the little lost girls in Kathmandu. We'll serve in a Mother Teresa orphanages in India. We'll go to the refugee camps and we'll serve and see the plight of humanity. The third week, we then process and talk, what does it mean to be a Christiansen man? Our values to protect, provide, and to righteously and strongly hold the space for women in honor and protection, and not in any demeaning way. So we call it protect, provide, and preside righteously. And that becomes, and fix a lot of stuff. And that becomes the content of my sons then becoming men. So that 12-year-old trip is what we call the non-entitlement trip. When they're 14 years old, I put every one of my sons on the top of a major world mountain peak. 3 in the Everest region. The 4th and 5th got a whole bunch of bonus, but we've climbed Kilimanjaro. We have went up some major hard mountains with them bawling the last 1,000 feet. The purpose of the trip is private victories, not public victories. You see, I don't want my children, their most important memory and their identity, making the winning basketball shot and carried off on the shoulders of the team. I don't want that. I want their power to come here inside. So it's private victories, not public victories, and the ability to do very hard things in private. So that's the 14-year-old trip. When my sons turned 16, this studio I'm in right here was my youngest son's project. Learn a life skill and take accountability, because I don't pay for college, I don't pay for their missions, I don't even pay for their car, and I don't even pay for our family vacations. But I help them build a business, and then they take accountability for their own future. When they turn 18, they shut the business down. they give all the extra proceeds actually to humanitarian efforts, typically the one they served when they were in 12. And at that point, they go off and they spend 2 years serving humanity, learning a second language and living incredibly humbly. They'll typically go internationally, learn the language, and just serve humanity for 2 years. Mm-hmm. When they get back, they're their own men. I want them to kill their father. I just want them to do it metaphorically. I don't want them to do it physically. I'm not going to ever have them work in my business. I want them to be their own man. The result? Well, my oldest son's 30. He's the chief technology officer of a major billion-dollar company. My second son has now exited 3 businesses. He's makes more money than his dad. My third son I have zero concern. Even my son that's 18, he had his mission paid for by college by the age of 11. He'd founded so many businesses. I don't have fear of my children taking accountability of their future, nor do I have fear of my grandchildren. Because written in our will, which is your part, the postmortem, we enable all of those things. That's what the money's used for. We never divide it. We use it to support these initiatives. Then I did put one last one in. When they become adult, I take them to a level 4 security prison and meet with incarcerated individuals for 2 days, teaching entrepreneurship and fatherhood with the premise and understanding that we're all so much similar. You deserve a second chance, Scott. I deserve a second chance. We all deserve a second chance, and none of us want to be held accountable for the worst thing that we've done, and that we need to be working very hard to address some of these really hard, difficult social issues and big issues that we face in the world, to go out and solve them. So those rites of passages instilled with deliberately underpinnings of the values, with the symbols, with the doctrine, with the tradition, have cemented with my sons to the point that my 3 oldest sons created $1 million business when they were in high school. $1 million businesses, and one of them 2, not 1. And then they had the courage to actually forsake it because they knew that they could do it, not get tied up in the things of the world. And, Scott, this works. I've discovered like this, and I was never going to share this. And then our dear friend Garrett absolutely just ripped me to pieces until he made me start sharing it. And now it's the most important thing I've ever brought forward. This recipe stabilizes families. This keeps you so that your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren are not going to have that terrible cycle of wealth interrupt, destroy lives, meltdown, live in scarcity like some people do, to actually build and stabilize and have impact in the world. Yeah. So that was a surge, but that's how passionately I feel about it, Scott.
It's great, Rich. And look, 3 things that come to me here to share. And for listeners, in transparency, the first time I heard this, and here I'm hearing it again, I had the same response. Candidly, it makes me feel like a complete dysfunctional father in some ways, because it's so powerful and impressive. And it's why I'm called to this and called to work with Rich and put something special together. Yet, it's never too late. Yet we're here to grow and improve. And so I'm not angst about it. I can just look back and say, wow, that is fantastic, and happy for him and his family, and not dwell on, coulda, shoulda, wouldas. It's here we are today. What can we do now moving forward? So that's the first thing to share. The second is, wow, these are rites of passage. And when you go back to the indigenous cultures, which Angie and I are both called to, more to come on that, but they had rites of passage for these very reasons. And it's like we've lost that. So this is such a cool, and look, this may or may not resonate what Rich's are. Mine won't be exactly like this, nor should they be. I'm a completely different person. I can only be me, and that needs to feel right. Yet, rites of passage, this goes back a long time as far as the value and benefit. I think that's missing. So that's the second. And then the third, you couple this with the planning of the proper wills and trust and the messaging. Garrett calls it statement of purpose. What it's called is not important as much as you have how do you make this a reality like the Rockefellers did? Even if you have 500,000, 200,000, whatever the numbers is, you can put something together where it's not too late to create rites of passage, no matter your age, for a family. And 3, put the documentation to support that so that you can put something together like this that goes on into perpetuity. So there are my 3 things to add, and this is what we're up to. And so wanted to share.
Can I just close a statement on that, just to put a capstone on that, because you are so correct. It doesn't take as much money and resource. I was shocked when Garrett taught me some of these profound principles of how you can actually endure and sustain the wealth and actually enable going forward. And that's why that 5th critical pillar on the right-hand side is the financial structure. And I'm so grateful that we get to a point and I can even learn more from you. I do want to address really heavily this concept of, I boofed it, it's too late, because I hear it all the time, particularly from parents that are deeply struggling with teenagers. And I just have to tell you, patience and kindness. And maybe on our next podcast, we can actually go through some of the suggestions that I have. But the reality is as soon as you start healing that relationship, it's amazing how vibrant and actually even more strong. And there's no need to apologize. We're all down here, honestly, bumbling around trying to figure it out. The question comes is, when do you interrupt the broken cycles? When do you interrupt it? Yep. You wait for your kids to figure it out, or your grandkids or your great-grandkids. And with this information, this is how you interrupt the cycle. My mother came from a horrific environment. Most people would be shocked at my story. At some point, we've got to stand. And I boofed it. I confessed one of my major boofs, and I still boof it. It's okay. The question is, do you want to interrupt some of the broken dysfunction? And it's amazing how quickly these relationships can heal. They really can heal, and we can do amazing things to actually stabilize them in their own way.
Yes, it's powerful. I agree. Here we are. This happens for reasons. And now what do we do when you want to interrupt that cycle? So this has been, I say, thank you for mentioning another podcast, because I'm going to take you up on that. I want to continue the conversation. I know we're going to continue having work to do and jointly, and more to share and more to come. So one final question really that I have for the audience today, Rich, and that is, that's what the Way to Wealth is about, is this kind of thing. How do you put this in place where it works? And this is not my area of expertise of these rites of passage and these rituals. So that's why Rich is here. If people want to learn more beyond things that we're going to put in the show notes of what Rich had talked about, of the symbols, the doctrines, and maybe a PDF that we'll be able to share that you can pull up on show notes, what would be other ways people could reach out and contact, necessarily reach out, but learn more about you and your work, Rich? How would people go about that?
I'd like to point them to a URL, if I could, legatofamily.com, LEGADO family, FAMILY.com. And that will take them onto the front end of this program. In all transparency, I've only been teaching this to really, really wealthy families. And that's not appropriate. This is actually more pertinent and valuable, I think, for all of us. And so we put together just a really meaningful power-packed program that can help guide you through these concepts. And you can find that at legatofamily.com.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. Enjoyed it. We're going to have you on again. Look forward to that and sharing this kind of wisdom. So much more to come. And thanks for listening in to the Way to Wealth podcast, where it's all about making money simple so that you can live fully and do it now. See you on the next episode.
The opinions voiced in Way to Wealth with Scott Ford, Managing Director, Partner, and Wealth Advisor of Carson Wealth, are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial, or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on Way to Wealth are not affiliated with CWM LLC or Cetera Advisor Networks LLC. Carson Wealth, 19833 Leitersburg Pike, Suite 1, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21742.